Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do: to educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade, Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons, and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. All right, welcome to the show, everyone. Today, my guest is Dugal Bain, and this is going to be an interesting conversation for us because I got introduced to Dugal by a mutual friend of ours, and he is someone who's building something that I think is pretty amazing, has built, is in the process of building as well. This is a company called Lifeforce. And I'm going to let Dugal introduce his background here in just a minute, but I just want to set us up for this conversation, Dugal. So as most of you know, my training is a naturopathic doctor. Now, that is probably the worst marketing term ever for a medical profession. I did this back in the early 90s. I decided I was going to go into naturopathic medical school. And at that time, it was considered witchcraft medicine. It was considered way out there. Many people told me not to do it, but I knew that I wanted to do lifestyle medicine. And this was really the only way that I could get a medical education in my mind while having expertise in exercise, in nutrition, and in psychology. And so I went in that direction, having no idea, by the way, that it would become a thing and that functional medicine would be so popular and that alternative and complementary medicine would be such a big deal. And now we have, historically speaking, I've seen my medicine be sort of a rich person's medicine in a sense, and also a type of medicine that is fragmented and it's kind of all over the place, right? You never know what you're going to get with particular practitioners. Some MDs are functional medicine practitioners and come to the complementary side and alternative side. Some naturopaths have such a natural medicine bias that they're not doing anything in the traditional medical world. And I'm one of these people who has always said, I don't care where it comes from. If it works, I want to, be a part of it. And if it doesn't work, I don't want to, be a part of it. I'm an evidence-based guy. So I take the best of natural medicine and I take the best of conventional medicine. And Dugal, to me, this is what your company is really trying to do, and trying to take this disparate, fragmented marketplace that we have with, some traditional people who are trained somewhat in the alternative world and some alternative people trained somewhat in the traditional world, and bring the best of both worlds together in a way that meets, the client where they are in personalized medicine. And so that's my take on what you were doing. I want to see if you think, yeah, Jade, you got it right or you got it wrong. And I also just want you to introduce yourself and tell us how you got into this space in the first place.
Yeah, for sure, Jade. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. I've loved listening to the show. I feel like a lot of the content in this category sometimes sounds the same, but the way you're blending mental and emotional and physical health together, I think makes it much more valuable, definitely for me as a listener. So thanks for everything you've done there. So I'm Dugal Bain. I'm CEO and one of the co-founders at Lifeforce. I've spent most of my career in healthcare technology, and really the common theme there that gets me excited and gets me sort of jumping out of bed is, how do you use technology to open up access to something that would otherwise only be available to a small niche of people, either because they've got a lot of money or a lot of connections or whatever it is. So I spent a good chunk of my career working on that sort of problem within the traditional healthcare side. And it was really around, how do you do a better job of helping people understand who's a good doctor and who's not? So using sort of data science to really measure outcomes that individual doctors are delivering. But then, I was always in this sort of conversation with myself around, wanting to get further upstream. And rather than waiting for things to be broken and then improving the experience of fixing them, how could you use technology to make proactive care available to more people? Because folks, again, with a lot of resources and a lot of money, have been able to get on the front foot about their health in a much more effective way than most people can at a much higher price point. So I've been chewing on that for a while. And then about 3 years ago, I had my first child, my daughter, Billy. And it was a really sort of interesting period for me because I went through 6 or 12 months of pretty poor health habits, just adjusting to having a young family, put on weight, a bunch of brain fog, not eating as well as I should have been. And I don't think that's that unusual, when you're dealing with a big life adjustment. But when I got to the point where I really wanted to get myself back on track, I felt very confident going into that because I'd always sort of been in the health space. I consider myself pretty health conscious and health literate. Used to be an athlete, et cetera, et cetera. But when I just tried to do the same things I'd done before around tightening up my diet or working out a little bit more, my body didn't respond like I expected it to. And it was the first time in my life where I felt out over my skis in understanding what had actually changed and what to do about it, which was pretty confronting. And it kind of sent me out on a bit of an odyssey as a consumer to try and get the answers, to try and find out, why can't I lose weight? Why is my energy low? Why is my libido down? All these things I'd just taken for granted up until that point of time. And it was super frustrating to go and try and get those answers from the solutions that were available at the time. I was getting a bunch of different sort of finger prick or saliva blood tests that were all done by different labs, had different reference ranges, all told me sort of different clues to what was going on, but none that actually told me the whole picture. And then I was, literally building spreadsheets on my own computer to try and track all the information and then try and go and talk about it with my primary care doctor, who just was somewhere in between like disinterested or irritated when I'd walk in with this data and want to talk about it because, in their defense, they had 7 minutes allocated for that visit and, no training or incentive to talk about proactive care in the way I wanted to. And then, hormone clinics trying to ship me testosterone with really little understanding of anything about my health and my goals. And then sort of really left with this option of pay 25 or 50K for a concierge clinic or just kind of fall back to what I'd been doing, which was taking a bunch of different supplements with no real understanding of what I actually needed and what I didn't. So that whole experience was, like I said, frustrating as a customer, but as an entrepreneur, it seemed just like a massive opportunity that if you could bring all of that together in one system and give folks who are health motivated, but also busy and have plenty of other stuff going on in their lives, a convenient place to go to get a system to understand what's happening in their bodies and the ability to actually follow through on that versus, just getting the insights with no idea of where to go next. If you could do that, then you can make this idea around proactive care something that's in the lives of, millions of people instead of the handful of folks who can afford to spend a lot of time and money on that. So, that was really my impetus in wanting to start Lifeforce. I started chatting about the idea with friends close to mine and got connected to a group of awesome co-founders. Joel Jackson, who is our technical leader, he's a AI and ML expert in this space. Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis, who are two of the biggest influences around life improvement and around the future of exponential technology, are co-founders as well. And Courtney Ream from M13, which is a venture firm here in LA, and who is a real thought leader in building these sorts of companies. We all started talking about it, and it was just clear that if we all got in the boat together, we'd have a much better chance of realizing this mission than each of us trying to do it on our own.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, because I'm an entrepreneur as well, and I know how difficult these things are. I know how difficult it is to go from sort of this idea to the implementation of that idea and make it all come together. And so it's exciting to see what you've done. And, I definitely resonate with this problem. I'll tell you kind of how I see this, and then we could start talking a little bit about health. But when I look at this, I see there's several different types of people, right? So you're talking about the idea of like, look, we want to get you before someone gets sick, right? And so we're looking at people who are optimizing themselves. I might call them optimizers. A lot of people who listen to this show are really optimizers, right? And that falls into like the biohacking community. It also falls into sort of, conventional medicine looking for hormone therapies and things like that. And certainly in the conventional world, lots of supplements and things of that matter. But usually you need, 2, 3, maybe even 4 practitioners. I mean, normally you have your conventional doctor who's looking after diagnosis. You've got someone like me, your functional medicine doctor, who is, sort of looking at you from an optimal standpoint, not just looking at disease. And then you've got, maybe, somebody who is doing body work and that kind of stuff, personal trainer type of thing. And then you got your psychiatrist, and on and on and on it goes. But at least in the medical realm, I've always thought too that it's like, why can't we just have one person in that realm? So we have a really good team of 3 or 4 people, one looking after psychology, maybe one coaching finance, maybe one coaching health and fitness, and one coaching purpose and meaning. And really, that's all you really need. So like, someone like a Tony Robbins, that's your personal purpose and meaning person. Someone like me, that's your health and fitness person, right? Then you got your, maybe your personal relationship coach, et cetera. But health and fitness has always been sort of left behind in a very difficult place to maneuver. Yep. So from my perspective, I'm interested on how you're making this happen. I have a couple questions because you and I are just now meeting each other. So tell me about how Lifeforce, what is it? Is this like taking the place of your physician? Does your physician refer you into Lifeforce? How does that work? Are you actually doing concierge type medicine here, or is this something that is in addition to a doctor like myself who might be affiliated with Lifeforce? Can I, as a consumer, just go right to Lifeforce and get my labs done and all that kind of stuff? Tell us how it works.
For sure. And I definitely want to acknowledge what you were hitting on around who we're for, really, in this concept of optimization and making that more accessible for people. Because we talk about this a lot internally as well. And the analogy I like to use is who we've built Lifeforce for is, if you thought about this more in terms of cars and mechanics, there are some people out there who love cars and love working on their own car in the garage on the weekends, and they go to car meetups and they're racing their cars, and they're deep enthusiasts and they love the craft of working on the car, right? Like that's sort of who I would compare to hardcore biohackers in this space. But then you have this whole other group of people who like to have a nice car that looks okay, runs well, is comfortable, but they'll keep an eye on the dashboard, and when something goes wrong, they'll take it into the dealership and they want the dealership to deal with it. That's really the second group that is the biggest opportunity here to improve the most lives, and that's really who we're building Lifeforce for. The hardcore biohackers, we have plenty of those folks with us. We love working with them. They're great sort of canaries in the coal mine around what's out there and how we should develop the platform. But we've always talked about being for folks who are health motivated, but also are just looking for convenience and trust and a single place to go, because, frankly, they've got a lot of other stuff they love to do and they don't want to spend all their time cobbling it together themselves. So one way to think about it is like making optimization easier and more able to be mass adopted is the thing that we're running at here with Lifeforce. And so to answer your question around, how does this fit into the healthcare ecosystem and how do you access it? So, at the moment, it's just a solution available directly to anyone who wants it. So you come to mylifeforce.com, you sign up for our membership. The first thing we do is we send a phlebotomist out to your house to do a full blood draw. And then you fill out an onboarding survey telling us all about your goals, how you're feeling, where you want to be in the future, your health history, all of that important context we need to understand. And then a medical doctor on our team, so we're a fully licensed national clinic. A medical doctor on our team looks at all of that information that you provided combined with your biomarker results and puts together a program for you. And the program combines anything on the lifestyle side, so movement, nutrition, sleep, stress, with anything on the nutraceutical or pharmaceutical therapy side, again, based on your individual physiology and your individual goals. And then you get started on your program. You've got a health coach on our team, so a certified health coach from Lifeforce available with you as much or as little as you want to help keep you on track. And in 3 months' time, we'll come back out to your house or your work and take another sample and compare the results. And by doing that every 3 months, we're creating this feedback loop that actually shows people, often for the first time, what's working, what's not, and how their bodies are responding to these different interventions. So the aim is to get people out of kind of spraying and praying for all the things they're spending their money and time on, and really starting to make this space much more data driven around, if we can't show progress in something or you're not seeing improvement, we should be talking about whether or not it should be included in your program at all. So that's how it works. And for most of our members, that sits as a complement to what they're doing with the traditional healthcare system. So some of our members also have a primary care doctor, but the concept of primary care has evolved a lot, as you know, and a lot of people are really using primary care now kind of just like urgent care. Like I get a rash or I've got the flu or I've got to get a vaccination. And so that's what I'll go to primary care for. So there's this big gap in most people's lives around an ongoing relationship that's really focused more around, let's keep you at your best now, and let's give you peace of mind that you're going to live a long time in the future. And, back, I think even probably in the 50s and 60s, primary care tried to do more of that, but over time it's evolved into something that's much, much more transactional. And so folks come to us because they're not getting this conversation around optimization and proactive care from the traditional healthcare system. And then they're also sick of sort of, guessing what to do in the wellness space. And they want something that sits right in the middle of those two categories.
Hey, everybody, jumping into the show real quick to talk about one of our sponsors. This is one of my favorite sponsors. You've heard about it, AG1 by Athletic Greens. Now, why do I love this product so much? Well, first of all, one of the things that I was doing prior to AG1 was I was doing a multivitamin. I was doing a probiotic. I was taking a fiber supplement. I was taking adaptogens, and I was taking a greens drink. And of course, I take other supplements, but AG1, one of the things that's so powerful about this greens product is that it is a multivitamin, prebiotic, probiotic. It has adaptogens in it, and it acts as my greens drink. So when I started taking this, I had 5 supplements that I could essentially get rid of just for this one. So there were a lot of savings there. But the other thing about this product, and many of you know this about me, is I am not somebody, unfortunately, and I know I'm in the health and fitness space, and it's kind of embarrassing to say, but I'm not somebody who loves vegetables. I don't always get my greens in. And so I want the extra assurance of all those polyphenols and all those plant chemicals that really bioflavonoids and all the rest that really bring health benefits to us. And these things are loaded in AG1. And so I add this into my water. And believe it or not, I add it into my protein shakes as well because it has such a neutral flavor. And one of the reasons I started using AG1, just as a reminder, is other greens drinks that use tapioca starch and things like that will elevate my blood sugars. Now, AG1 does not do that. And it's got this very neutral flavor, so I can stick it in my protein shakes and take it in water as well. The other thing I love about AG1 is they're fanatical about testing. They are NSF certified. That's the National Sanitation Foundation. And they test for heavy metals. They test for persistent organic pollutants. They test for all other harmful chemicals of industry. And here's the thing. The fact of the matter is this testing is not cheap. And so a lot of people don't do this. And if you think you are safe, just go to consumerlabs.com or any of these organizations that are testing products, and you will find out pretty quickly that a lot of these products that we think we are doing something good for our health with are not testing, and you're having heavy metals, persistent organic pollutants, forever chemicals showing up in them. AG1 is on their 52nd integration of this product. So they continue to innovate, they continue to tweak, they continue to make it better. It is an excessively clean product through this testing and this constant sort of reintegration and making this product better. And so I cannot recommend this product strongly enough. This is one of the ones that I think every single person should get and be taking every single day. Like I said, it's got multiple benefits. And so to make it easy for you, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of an immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/next level. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/next level to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, let's get back to the show. Yeah, it's great. It sounds like literally if someone came to see me, that this is essentially how I ran things in my clinic when I was, in the clinic. And the fact that you're making this widely available is really amazing. Let's get into this because I know it's something that, you and I were talking a bit before we started recording. And that's this idea of health, right? Like in general. From my perspective, I've always had this, and I'll play devil's advocate a little bit here, but I've always had this thing where, for example, if you look at me, a lot of people will go, "Oh, well, Jade's a muscular guy. He's got six pack, or he's got whatever it is. If you were to look at me with my shirt off, but at the same time, I feel fatigued. I have a diagnosis of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I can easily gain a lot of fat. I can easily have a very puffy look. The way I feel and the way I felt prior to these diagnoses didn't always reflect the way I looked. Not to mention, we hear all the time about, this particular marker is, a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And then, whoops, nope, that marker is not really a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Mm-hmm. This one is. We hear all the time about, this hormone or this new peptide or whatever it is that's coming on the, healthcare market. And my contention has always been, and I'll share this with you and see what you say, is that really when we're going to evaluate people, we want to evaluate essentially what is going on with the way they feel. I oftentimes describe it as biofeedback. So this would be things like sleep, hunger, mood, energy, cravings, exercise performance, exercise recovery, et cetera. It's sort of this vitality marker. What do you feel like? Now, of course, a car can be running well, to use your analogy, but still have problems under the hood. So then, essentially you have to go look under the hood. This is vitals, blood labs, things like that. And then, of course, there is a relation between the way you look, right, and the way you feel and the way you function. So this is, attaining and or maintaining optimal body composition. So to me, I've always had this thing where, if you feel good, biofeedback wise, vital, hunger under control, cravings under control, energy stable, good performance in the gym, all of that, you look good in terms of you're achieving and or maintaining optimal body composition, and your blood labs are moving into optimal ranges, then to me, I go, I don't care what you're eating or what you're doing. That's probably the right plan for you. And it's a very individualized way of doing things. Now, maybe I'm wrong here, but it sounds like this is partly the approach you are taking, at least in terms of looking under the hood.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you went here because this is the North Star question for our whole company, and the thing that we really start the conversation around with our members is, are you healthy? Which seems like a really basic, simple question. But when we push people and we say, okay, how do you really know? And what does that even mean to be healthy? That's where the conversation gets really interesting. When we ask people that, we usually get one of two responses. We get people saying, I don't know, which totally makes sense because most of us don't. Or we get people saying, yeah, I guess I'm healthy because I'm not sick or injured right now. Because we've sort of been conditioned by society to think about health is just like such a low bar. Like if I'm not sick or I'm not injured, then I guess I'm healthy, which is kind of crazy. It's like saying, if I don't have a lot of debt, then I must be wealthy. But in reality, we know wealth is a lot about much, much more than that, and health should be as well. So what we draw on when we're thinking about what health means at Lifeforce is really three pillars of what it means to be truly healthy, and they actually map really well to the framework you laid out there, which is great. The first one is around how do I feel, and specifically, do I feel like I have the things I need to do the things I love to do? So this is things like energy, mental clarity, strength, stamina, recovery, libido, all of those quality of life assets that really go into living the way you want to live. So, that's pillar number one. The second one is around how likely am I to die prematurely? It's interesting to see this whole conversation around longevity play out at the moment. You've got a lot of hype around live to 150 and whatever. But really the best way to live a long time is not die prematurely. And so we think about the top 5 diseases that are most likely to take people out, and get people to really start to try and understand in a more quantified way, where is their risk of dying prematurely from cancer, from diabetes, from dementia, from osteoporosis, from heart disease and stroke. And then the third is how fast are you aging at the cellular level, which is basically if we can help you with the first two around quality of life and risk of dying prematurely, then we are starting to get to a point where there's science around your actual speed of cellular aging, and that's the most nascent of the three pillars, but it's an important piece of the story that people should understand for sure. And so if you can answer those three questions or those three pillars with confidence, then you finally have a really good perspective on how healthy you are, and you can start to build a real plan around the priorities that are most important within that framework.
Yeah. One thing that I want to ask you about is and I'll use myself as an example. It's just always useful to do that. But so for me, if you looked at me in terms of, if you gave me a stress test, for example, I haven't said this on the podcast yet, but about 3 years ago, in the middle of the pandemic, I was sitting there on a meeting, on Zoom, and felt like I was having a heart attack during the meeting. And basically, I told I was leading the meeting and started to feel this sort of weird thing. Anyway, long story short, I told my coworker, "Can you take over the meeting?" And I just sat there feeling this, and I was like, "I got to go see a cardiologist." So I called a friend of mine. This is what's nice about being in the healthcare industry, right? So I called a friend of mine, and it was basically, they cleared their schedule. I was all day at the cardiologist, and they ran me, he ran me through every test, stress test and everything, and I passed with flying colors. And I do a lot of interval work. So even on the stress test, I kind of aced it. We did all the stuff. He's like, "You're fine. Like, your heart is perfect, 0 calcium score, like you're tops, you're functioning like, 20-year-old. Now, what's interesting about that is if you looked at me on paper, then we did my blood labs, right? So then he did my blood labs, and he's like, "Oh, wow, like you've got very high cholesterol." Pretty much have since I was in high school. I remember having a cholesterol level of 300 in high school, right? HDL levels, not bad, but not good. LDL levels, too high. Triglycerides, pretty good because I work out. Blood sugars, fairly good, but ticking up a little bit higher than you would think. So in other words, I look like a disaster on paper, right? In terms of my cardiovascular risk. My actual, cardiovascular function tests were, passed sort of with flying colors. And, I tend to do workout. I eat, fairly good. I feel okay. I do have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which explains a little bit about the cholesterol levels and things like that. But ultimately, what I have found, and this is just something to throw out just for us to kind of discuss, is what I have found is it's very difficult to know just from looking at someone on paper exactly what their risk is. And I've gotten to the point now where we're doing the best we can in medicine. Like, still looking at someone like me doesn't matter. It's still where the data's at. Doesn't matter what the cardio told me. I still on paper need to look after those blood labs because that's the best sort of indication of risk that we have thus far. And so I try to do the things that I need to do. But I'm wondering how you all at Lifeforce handle this. And what I mean by this, I mean this oftentimes confusing sort of way that we measure health. Can we really tell exactly what's going on with someone just because of what their blood labs are doing? Can we really tell just because of the way they're feeling? And is it just about putting all these things together and crossing our fingers and hoping for the best? And the reason I want to cover this first is because then I want to talk about what can we do in an evidence-based way with supplements, drugs, and everything else that can make a difference. But I'm wondering if you have any opinion on this, because, you might say, I'm one of these, maybe, Dugal's one of these people. It's like, no, it's just all in the blood labs and, whatever. But I'm just interested on if you see it the way I see it or you see it differently. Because to me, I don't know that there's a clear answer that we can get to. We do the best we can, but I still don't know that even with all the labs and all the tests and all that stuff, we really can, get to the bottom of our actual risks.
Yeah, it's funny because on the outside, you and I look kind of similar if I could grow better facial hair. But it sounds like we look a bit better, similar on the inside as well, because what you just described around looking like someone who's pretty healthy on the exterior, but actually having potentially elevated risk of a heart attack is exactly what I've been going through in the last 6 months as well. So my ApoB, which is one of the biomarkers we test for, it's one of, if not the best marker of risk of heart attack and stroke, has been trending in the wrong direction for the last 4 quarters. It actually had been something that's been elevated for the last 10 years, but was never raised to me when I was getting physicals from traditional healthcare. But as I've worked with my Lifeforce doctor, we've been trying different lifestyle modifications to get that down. But I was still tracking at about an 18% risk of a heart attack in the next 25 years, which sounds like a long time horizon, but I'm 38 years old. So you think of nearly a 1 in 5 chance of having a heart attack, before my early 60s was pretty scary for me. But you'd never know that just from looking at, how I present physically or how I'm feeling at all. So, to answer your question, I think that there's a lot more art in these sorts of decisions than people often realize. Like, it's all really depends on the whole context of someone, which is why it's so important to have all of these different data sets together. So you mentioned, the blood work and what you look like on paper. It's not just a few markers, it's being able to, really see the whole picture of what's going on inside someone's system with a clinician who knows how to interpret things through a certain lens, not just kind of looking more arbitrarily at, what's outside the clinical diagnosis range and what isn't. It's much more around trends and patterns and context on the biomarkers that tells the story. And then, of course, you want to look at how people are feeling, how they're presenting, family history, really digging in on that side of it. These are all clues and making a much more educated decision about risk and return. And the way we think about it is, for the folks we work with, it's really more about consultation versus us telling people black and white, do this or do that. It's more about empowering you with the information and the expertise to think about how you want to handle the different issues or opportunities that we can see, and then partnering on that decision together. And the way you and I may just decide to react to having an elevated heart attack risk is probably going to be different because we've got our own life experience, our own priorities and goals for the future. And in my opinion, like that's how it should be. I actually think the more narrow the solution or the more narrow the lens, the less accurate and nuanced the decision can be about what's the right path forward.
It's time for one of our sponsors, and this sponsor is a very exciting one and a new one, Timeline Nutrition and their supplement MitoPure. Now, if I was going to ask you what is the most important aspect of metabolism, the mitochondria would have to be tops on your list. The mitochondria are the little energy producing factories inside every single one of your cells. They take the end products of the food we eat, they break them down into cellular ATP and provide energy for the entire metabolism. And these mitochondria, if they are healthy and acting appropriately, can keep us looking good, feeling good, living longer, and functioning better. However, when they are not at optimal function, when they are burning energy in a dirty fashion, when they are damaged, they actually speed cellular aging. They speed up the aging process. We end up suffering from things like fatigue. We end up having all manner of dysfunctions, including weight loss resistance and other issues around weight loss. The mitochondria are the most important elements for the metabolism to function optimally, lose weight, age appropriately, etc. In this compound, MitoPure, that Timeline Nutrition has developed, there is a product called urolithin A. Now, urolithin A is an interesting compound because it is a postbiotic. Now, what does that mean? A postbiotic is a compound that is made from the bacteria in the gut. And so when you eat things like pomegranates, strawberries, walnuts, things with polyphenols like this, they go into the digestive tract, your gut bacteria start working on them, and they can create compounds. Urolithin A is one compound that is in the MitoPure product. It comes from, naturally occurs in nature from this bacteria in our gut that break down the polyphenols from primarily foods like pomegranates, strawberries, etc. And it can increase mitophagy in mitochondria. So you might say, well, Jade, what is mitophagy? Mitophagy is the ability for mitochondria to repair and regenerate and recycle their proteins and to stay healthy and functional and de-age. When we can stimulate mitophagy, we can keep our mitochondria functioning efficiently. We can decrease aging. We can increase energy. We can improve our ability to lose weight, function optimally, and stave off diseases of aging. This is what Timeline Nutrition has done with their MitoPure product and the urolithin A that is in it. This is a very exciting area of research. We have not had the ability to support the mitochondria in the way that we do now with this particular product. You definitely are going to want to check this out. I've been taking the product for several months now. It is one of these products that I really, really strongly recommend. To get the product MitoPure, all you have to do is go to timelinenutrition.com/next level. timelinenutrition.com/next level. And let's get back to the show. Yeah. Yeah. I'll say something, that I think, and if I'm hearing you right about what Lifeforce does, to me, this has always been the answer to this conundrum. To me, I'm like, I don't know. It is part science. It is part art. But if I test and I retest and I retest and I retest and I make the adjustments and I play like metabolic detective, I can get into a place where I have a much better understanding of what's going on with me. So for example, I've tried keto diets, I've tried very low carb diets, I've tried regular diets. The bodybuilding diet, which is sort of low fat, moderate carb, higher protein, seems to be the best for me in terms of some of my cardiovascular risks. Now, I've done that because I've tested and retested. Now, I've been able to test and retest because I'm also a clinician and I have access to this. And so what I see with Lifeforce, and if I'm hearing you correctly, you are testing, you're retesting again. So you now have data points to see, okay, well, I don't necessarily know for sure, but one of the things I was excited to hear is that you are measuring the state of the art markers for cardiovascular disease. And then you're testing and retesting those to see what those interventions are doing. And of course, matching that, just because ApoB is elevated, you're looking at triglycerides, fasting blood sugars, and all the other markers that, go into this picture. But I do think the test retest type of approach is something that has not been doable for most people. I mean, I could tell you as a clinician, I would want to run labs quarterly as well. Most people decided not to, unless there was, a clear indication that something was wrong. They didn't want to run tests again because tests cost. And so with a typical client of yours, how often are you doing this? Is it every 3 months? Is this up to the client and the doctor? Like how much are you testing, retesting?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the retesting helps you're progressively filling out the picture of what's really going on. I think sometimes that can be a bit of a misperception that you come in, you sort of do an initial set of tests, and then you've got your program, and it's kind of one and done, and you're off and running and have all the answers. And that's really not how we think about it. It's the start of the journey, and it usually takes 2, 3, 4 quarters of working with someone. And along the way, obviously, we're knocking off the low-hanging fruit and helping them feel better and improve their health. But a lot of these issues, you need to see how someone's body responds to different interventions. And you and I, or anyone listening to this, would have their own unique response to their program. And we need to see it in the wild, and we need to collect the data and observe, and then we can tweak the program and sort of continuously improve it. And at the same time, your body's not static. It's obviously continuing to change, and you're continuing to move through life. New things new patterns are emerging, new opportunities are springing up. So it's an ongoing conversation, and it's an ongoing sort of exploration of what's going on in your body. But yeah, I do agree with you that the retesting is key to this, and we see that often when people start their program, we're on a pretty tight cadence of retesting every 3 months. So you'll have your initial panel, and then we'll do every panel's a full comprehensive rerun. We'll do that 3 months later, 3 months after that. By about 9 or 12 months' time, we've got a pretty good sense of what's going on, and people are, for the most part, in the green zone. And then we can get into a cadence that's more like every 4 months, probably on average after that, which is still plenty. But there's something around the retesting that's also helpful just for behavior change, which is, shouldn't be underestimated, that if you've got a retest coming up, it has this accountability mechanism where you're keeping yourself on track, and you start to sort of gamify it and look forward to the results. And it makes everything much more active versus having an annual physical where you get told a bunch of things once a year, you forget them on the drive home, you're not having another conversation for 12 months' time. So very little happens in terms of actual changes to lifestyle or actual improvements.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I used to do this the same way in my clinic. It's basically pretty much every 3 months, sometimes every month, depending on what someone is dealing with. But starts out every 3 months. Then I move to twice per year, then once per year, and I always do once per year because, as you say, as you see improvements and people make improvements, you don't need to test as much. But in the beginning, it is highly motivational. So let's cover the last part here that I'm really interested in, and that is what are the treatment options, right? So from my understanding, you're doing some pretty amazing things here. So yes, it looks like you have the supplement sort of interventions, which people are used to, but it looks like also you're doing, and this is my expertise, as most people listen to the show know. I gnashed my teeth in endocrinology, so female hormones, male hormones. Uh, I'm not as up on peptide therapy, but I am very interested because I saw you all are doing that as well. But it looks like you literally have the cutting edge treatment options that up until this point you'd have to be a Hollywood actor or somebody who's really in the know or has a very highly knowledgeable skill set of a functional medicine practitioner to get this stuff. So it looks like you have, sort of the full complement of all these anti-aging optimization sort of techniques, from hormones to peptides to supplements. And I'm very interested in that, and how all of that works and how you prioritize and, put these things in hierarchy. For me, it's normally, look, let's change the diet, exercise patterns, then maybe supplements, and then perhaps, peptides, hormones, et cetera. And I'm wondering how you all look at this, and maybe even what percent of people are coming to you for hormone therapy, because that's something that a lot of my listeners want me to do for them. I'm not in the clinic anymore, so they are always asking.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So how we think about the intervention side and what we offer our members is it's really all a toolkit that our doctors can pull from depending on what's appropriate for the individual person, and that thing I was mentioning before around it being really like a shared decision-making process on what are your goals, how aggressive do you want to be, what's your appetite around risk return, all of that sort of thing goes into building the programs. But the main goal for us was we just wanted one broad toolkit, so we had the opportunity to meet people with whatever it is they need and they decide to go for. So this idea that you'd have, you kind of getting your supplements from Amazon or for whatever, and then your doctor's prescribing you some stuff, and then maybe you're working with a nutritionist on diet, and that those things wouldn't all be connected was crazy to us. So that's why we wanted to have the lifestyle side with the supplements, with the pharmaceuticals, all together in one toolbox to pull from. And generally speaking, we'll try and meet people with the sort of the intensity of intervention that matches up to their goals and what we think is the best option clinically. And that really varies by the individual. Like for myself, in the example that I just shared before, risk of heart attack, I've got a family history of heart attack. I told you my ApoB was elevated. I personally wanted to be really aggressive on bringing that down as quickly as possible. I'd done a bit of my own research. I had a couple of conversations with my doctor. And then, so we decided based on that to, move aggressively on the lifestyle side through changes to my diet, specifically a Mediterranean diet, but then also to get me on statin therapy to really get my ApoB down as quickly as possible. And I had the flexibility to do that because we have, everything available in the toolkit. Versus someone else who might have wanted to spend more time just on lifestyle changes and see how that pulls through in their blood work. So, what we don't want to do here, though, is get too experimental. So the way we think about it is giving people access to the best of what's safe and validated and ready, and also being sort of the arbiter for people around what's nonsense or what doesn't have the research behind it yet. So you sort of think about this, there's this crazy stat around new research breakthroughs taking 17 years to make it from research into clinical practice for the average primary care clinic. So you think about that, and by the time your protocols in primary care are getting updated in your average clinic, they're usually already decades out of date. So part of what we want to do is shorten that time horizon and give people access to cutting edge research sooner when it's ready, but also help people make sense of what's going on in this whole space, like this whole space around longevity and anti-aging and optimization, as you obviously know very deeply, has some fantastic interventions in it, and it has some stuff that's absolute nonsense or isn't safe or isn't backed by real evidence. And to ask the average consumer to make that judgment call themselves, I think is sort of unfair. So what we're trying to do is be that trusted guide so that people know, okay, if Lifeforce has added it to the platform, our clinical review board has looked at it, we've done the due diligence. That's sort of the bar we hold ourselves to in terms of what we'll offer to folks. And over time, as more research comes out, more things will make it to the platform, but not until they're ready.
Yeah, I love it. So as we sort of wrap up, man, I'm curious. I want to get a sense from you a little bit of sort of where you're at and what your pet peeves are with this, and what you're sort of hoping to accomplish with this. Because I don't know about you, but for me, this to me addresses a real problem. I have honestly become quite disillusioned with my profession, in particular, naturopathic doctors, who I feel like have just gone off the deep end in terms of not doing evidence-based medicine, and and then I've kind of also initially was disillusioned with the traditional medical, who is so lacking, any kind of imagination in terms of reinterpreting data, looking at lifestyle. It's some people could argue that all of nutrition research is, not very good to begin with, because it's incredibly difficult to do that research. And so I've always thought, and my pet peeve is, the answer to this is to really be letting research, sort of refine your approach, and letting the individual define your approach. That I do think it's part art, science. I'm wondering where you're coming from with this, and just your general sort of view on this, and how you feel like Lifeforce is solving it.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully agree. I would love to, when we think, in the next 10 years or looking into the future, I'd love to see both sides of this conversation move more towards the middle. I would love to see traditional healthcare become more progressive, and definitely start to place more value, and literally more dollars on proactive care and health optimization. And I think that is starting to happen now. And then I would love to see the sort of alternative medicine side hold a bit of a higher bar around evidence and around impact and quantification of what's actually happening with people. I think both of those conversations moving towards the middle would support this middle ground, where I think all the value is, which is being proactive, being progressive, but also being safe and responsible, and doing it with a real focus on empowering the individual. I mean, it's your body, it's your life, it's your goals. You should be equipped with everything you need to make the right decisions, and of course have the right experts guiding you on that. But that's our philosophy around this conversation, and that's how we're building Lifeforce. And I think for people who have made the decision to sort of get out of the passenger seat and get into the driver's seat on their health, there's a lot of craving for that sort of thing right now.
Yeah. It's interesting to me, just knowing that you said, did I hear you right? Tony Robbins is one of your founders, right? Which
That's
is
right. Yep.
is really interesting, because I come from the medical world first, but I'm currently working on my PhD in psychology, and that's sort of my world, self-development, personal development. So I kind of think, I'm about personal transformation and physical transformation. It's really interesting that he has, moved into this direction too, because obviously I've always thought the two are impossible to do without each other. To me, it's impossible to really look at after your health and fitness without, sort of this attention to mindset and mindfulness and personal development. So I was really interested to see that him and his team are involved here as well, because I really think we're also going to find that without some of these mindset shifts, and you're speaking of a mindset shift of, individualized medicine. I talk about it as, becoming the metabolic detective, not the dieter, not the biohacker necessarily, but a real detective. And the difference between a biohacker to me and a metabolic detective is, a biohacker is just trying every new thing that comes around. A metabolic detective knows what works, and only sticks with what works, and doesn't waste their time on anything else. But I'm really excited to see that, some of the people that you have on board with you. And are you guys planning on going into, I assume not, and because he's got a whole other platform, but are you planning on going into personal development type stuff and that kind of thing? Or is this sort of that arm that he is, sort of wanting to get into health and fitness?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like you should get a trademark on metabolic detective. I think someone might steal that off you
Yeah,
listening to this. Yeah, it's been awesome having Tony helping to launch and grow Lifeforce. Tony's obviously doesn't come from a science and clinical background, but he is the world leader in helping people live better lives through better mindsets and connection to purpose and ways to unlock their potential. And so for him, the role that health plays in living your best life is enormous, and is something that he's taken very seriously in his own personal health journey. And so for him, this is an opportunity to bring that whole side of the conversation to his community in a way that he hadn't done before. And he talks a lot around the healthy person has a lot of dreams, but the unhealthy person only has one, which is to be healthy.
yeah,
And so he's been fantastic for us in particularly the sort of how we tell the story, how we connect to the underlying human reasons why people want this, because it's super easy to get lost, especially if you love this space like you and I do here, get lost in the biomarkers and the protocols and everything. But Tony's always a really great gut check that the reason people are fundamentally coming to us is because they want to live great lives with the people they love, doing the things they love to do.
yeah,
And everything we do is in service of that. So over time, there's nothing planned right now for us on the psychological, spiritual, emotional side. Although when you think of even the name of the company, Lifeforce, and what goes into that, it's a massive piece of the story. So whether or not it's something we do ourselves directly is TBD, but definitely through partnerships and the way that we can help to guide our members to whatever they need to access that whole side of what makes life good. That's definitely something we're going to spend some time on. You could almost think about, I mentioned those 3 pillars around how you're feeling, risk of premature death, and how quickly you're aging. You could imagine a kind of 4th pillar that's kind of in the background at the moment, which is around life satisfaction and contentment.
yeah,
And how are you doing on that whole front?
yeah.
So we don't want to get spread too thin away from our focus, but I think there's a lot of awesome folks like yourself who are doing great work there. So we want to be a conduit for that and help use Lifeforce to connect more people to more of that experience.
Yeah, well, you said it best, man. I mean, if you can help make this part easier, the health and fitness aspect, the purpose and meaning, the fulfillment side, the contentment side, is much easier to do. So tell us how to get involved with Lifeforce, and where can people find you, Dugal, if they want to get more from you personally, and then also how do they get involved with Lifeforce if they are looking to try this out?
For sure, yeah. So if folks are listening to this and thinking it sounds like you and you do want to get on the front foot about your health, you can come to mylifeforce.com and get started for membership there. We're also on social at Go Lifeforce, on Instagram and on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn, just Dugal Bain -Kim -KIM. So always love talking to folks who've got ideas around how we can get better, who just love geeking out on this space. And we're really here to make it easier for folks to do this the right way. So if you're ready, we're ready, and you can go to mylifeforce.com and we'll get started.
Yeah, I appreciate you so much for having this conversation, Dugal. Thanks so much for being on. And to all of you, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you at the next show.
Awesome. Thanks, Jade.
You have been listening to the Next Level Human podcast with Dr. Jade Teta. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe and consider leaving a review. You make the biggest difference when you pass on your lessons and inspire others. That's why reviews like this are so powerful. Your words may be the only ones that resonate for someone else. Please remember the information in this podcast is for educational purposes only. Always consult your personal physician or therapist before making any lifestyle changes. And finally, thank you for who you are in the world and the difference you make.